Some stories pick up gently. They ease you back in, give you a moment to settle, to remember where things left off, to breathe before the next wave hits. This one does not do that. This one starts with papers hitting a woman's face in a room full of people who decided, before she even walked through the door, that she did not belong there. It starts with a pregnancy test result printed on white paper scattered across polished marble. It starts with a family that had spent 8 months building a wall around their son and had finally decided it was time to use it. If you watched season 1, you already know Monifer Benjamin. You know what it took for her to get here. $200 and a dream. Seoul on her own terms. A boardroom she walked into uninvited and owned. You know Kang Minit-jun feared CEO. The man 12 women ran from before she came along and simply refused to perform. You know what they chose. What it cost them. What they survived. But surviving something once does not make you immune to it. It just means you already know it hurts. This is season 2. And it starts exactly the way the worst moments always start. Fast, public, and without mercy. The envelope hit the table first. It landed flat, and for a second nobody moved, and the room was the kind of quiet that happens right before something breaks. Then Minit-jun's mother's hand came down on top of it, and she slid it across the polished surface. And the papers inside fanned out when the envelope tipped off the edge and they scattered, white sheets across imported marble, catching the cold overhead light of a living room that had been designed specifically to make certain people understand their position. Monifer did not flinch. She stood in the center of that room, because that was where they had positioned her, not by instruction but by arrangement, chairs angled just enough that she was the only person standing, the only person without a surface to lean on, the only person without a wall at her back, and she looked at the papers around her feet. A pregnancy test result. Printed. Official. Dated 4 months prior. Below it, a medical report. Brief. Clinical. The kind of language that reduces the most devastating things to terminology. She had seen these documents before. She had been the one who received them, who sat with them, who folded them carefully and put them somewhere private because some things are yours and only yours until you decide otherwise. Someone had decided otherwise for her. Minit-jun's mother stood at the far end of the room. She was a small woman, which people always found surprising when they first met her because the space she occupied felt much larger than her physical size suggested. Her name was Kang Myung-soo, and she had spent 40 years being the quiet power behind a very loud empire, and she had never in those 40 years raised her voice because she had never needed to. She did not raise it now. "We know," she said. Simply, like a door closing. One of the aunts. There were 2 of them, seated on the low sofa to the left, both dressed as if this were a formal occasion, which it was, just not the kind anyone had announced, made a sound that landed somewhere between disgust and confirmation. "You thought this would secure your position," his mother continued. A pregnancy appearing at exactly the moment the family was discussing the future, and then disappearing just as conveniently. "She's saying you fabricated it," the younger aunt said, in case the accusation needed clarifying. It did not. From the far chair, the one positioned slightly apart from everything else, angled so that whoever sat in it could see the entire room without appearing to surveil it, Minit-jun's grandmother said nothing at all. She was 91 years old and she had outlasted 4 business rivals, 2 government investigations, and 1 hostile acquisition attempt. She did not need words for a moment like this. Her silence was architecture. And then there was Seo Yerin. She was standing slightly to the left, near the window, positioned with the specific care of someone who wanted to appear incidental but had chosen her location deliberately. She was beautiful the way expensive things are beautiful, intentionally, thoroughly, without accident. Her family had prepared her for a role. Her entire presentation was the evidence of that preparation. She was watching Monifer with an expression that was almost gentle, which was the most dangerous possible expression she could have worn, because gentleness in a room like this was not softness. It was certainty. It meant she had already decided how this ended and felt nothing but mild sympathy about it. Monifer's eyes moved slowly around the room. She took it all in. The positioning, The documents, the faces, the silence from the grandmother's corner, the performance from the aunts, the careful neutrality from Yarin that was not neutral at all. She understood exactly what this was. It was not a confrontation. It was an execution that had been planned in advance and required only her presence to proceed. She looked at the papers on the floor around her feet. Then she looked at Minutjan's mother. "I don't expect you to believe anything," she said. Her voice came out quieter than she meant it to, but steadier, much steadier than anything she was feeling. The mother paused. Something flickered. "Then why are you here?" she said. "Because Minutjan asked me to be." The room shifted. Not visibly. Not in any way that could be pointed to afterward. But something in the arrangement changed, like furniture that has been moved 2 inches. Everything looks the same, but the balance is different. Then the door opened, and Kang Minutjan walked in. If something in that room just reached through the screen and grabbed you, tell us where in the world you are watching from right now. Drop your city in the comments below. We read every single one. And if this is your first time finding Seoul and the Sahara, welcome. Stay with us. This story has a long way to go and every part of it matters. Minutjan did not knock. He was not the kind of man who knocked in rooms that belonged to his family. But more than that, knocking would have introduced a hesitation that did not belong in the way he moved. He came through the door and the atmosphere of the room adjusted around him the way rooms do around people who have spent their whole lives being the most significant presence in them. He was in a dark suit. No tie. He had come directly from a meeting that had run over by 40 minutes, which was why he was late, which was why he had walked into this instead of preventing it. That detail would cost him sleep for weeks. His eyes found Monife in under 2 seconds. One moment. Just one. Where they looked at each other and the entire accumulated weight of what had been happening in this room passed between them in silence. The papers on the floor, the positioning, the faces, all of it, and something in his jaw set in a way that was almost imperceptible unless you knew what to look for. Then his eyes went to the papers scattered across the marble, then to his mother, then to the grandmother, then back to the center of the room, where he stood in the specific stillness of a man who has arrived at a decision. "Everyone who is not immediate family," he said. "Leave the room." The assistants and peripheral relatives who had been positioned near the walls moved immediately. Nobody questioned it. This was the voice he used in boardrooms when the discussion portion of a meeting had ended. The body understood it before the mind did. Yarin did not move. Minutjan looked at her. She met his gaze. She held it for a moment that was 3 seconds longer than comfortable, which was itself a statement, and then she picked up her bag from the chair beside her and walked to the door. She did not hurry. She would not give him the satisfaction of hurry. The door closed behind her. Now it was 6 people and the weight of everything that had been said. His mother started. "Minutjan, before you. Who authorized access to her medical records?" Not a question. The absence of a question mark was itself the point. He was not asking who had done it. He was telling everyone in the room that he already knew, and that the answer they gave would determine what happened next. His mother's expression shifted from prepared to uncertain. That information was obtained through. Who authorized it? She stopped. The grandmother spoke from her corner. Her voice was the same as it had always been, dry, precise, utterly without decoration. "It doesn't matter how it was obtained. What matters is what it reveals about her intentions." Minutjan looked at his grandmother. He had organized his entire professional existence around the respect he had for this woman. Had made decisions for 20 years with one eye always on what she would think. Had built habits of deference so deep they had become structural. He examined those habits now. Carefully. The way you examine something you have been carrying for so long you forgot it had weight. "What it reveals," he said, "is that she was pregnant, that she lost the baby, and that someone in this family made the decision to take that loss and weaponize it." Nobody spoke. "That," he said, "is what is being revealed. About this family." His mother's chin came up slightly. The defensive posture of a woman who has prepared for many versions of this conversation but not this one. "She never told us about the pregnancy. She hid it. Why would she hide something like that unless she was planning? Because she was grieving, he said. And she was grieving alone because this room has never been a safe place for her to put anything down. The words landed differently than anything else he had said. They landed in a way that even the grandmother registered, though her expression did not change. Monife was standing very still. She had not moved since he walked in. She was watching him with an attention that was not the same as the attention she had given him in any previous moment in their 8 months together. This was different. This was the attention of someone watching a person they thought they knew reveal a room they had not yet seen inside. He did not perform for her. He did not perform for anyone. He was simply saying what was true and what needed to be said, and he was saying it in this room with all of them present because this was the room where it needed to be said. His grandmother looked at Monife for a long moment. Then at Minutjun. "This conversation is not finished," she said. "Not today it isn't," he agreed. "But today it is." He walked to the papers on the floor. He bent down and picked them up one by one, not quickly, not with drama, just methodically, the way he did everything that required his hands. He straightened them. He placed them on the table. Then he stood beside Monife. Not in front of her. He had thought about this. Not in this moment. He had thought about it before, in the days leading up to this, in the way he thought about positioning in every significant situation. And he had decided that standing in front of her would be protection that looked like control. Standing beside her was different. It said, "This is where I am. Not between you and her. Here, with her. Do you want to leave?" he asked her. Quietly enough that only she could hear it clearly. She looked at him. She looked at the room. She looked at the grandmother, who was still watching her with those ancient, calculating eyes that missed nothing. "Yes," she said. They left. He drove. He always drove himself when he needed to think, which the people around him had learned early meant he needed the specific kind of solitude that only exists when you are technically doing something so that nobody asks you to talk. His cars were good for this. Dark windows. Good suspension. Seoul blurring past in all its enormous indifference. Monife sat in the passenger seat with her hands in her lap and looked at the city and said nothing. 3 intersections passed. 4. A long stretch of Gangnam-dero where the lights came in waves. "I'm sorry," he said. She did not respond immediately. She was looking at a building they were passing, a glass tower she probably saw every week, probably had a client in it, probably had walked into it 50 times. She was looking at it the way you look at something familiar when you need your eyes to be somewhere that isn't the interior of your own head. "I should have been there before it started," he said. "The meeting ran over. I should have." "You got there," she said. "That's not Jun." Her voice was not sharp. It was just certain. "You got there." He stopped. The light ahead turned red. He stopped the car. He sat in the quiet for a moment and she sat in it with him, and the city moved around them in every direction without pausing. "Thank you," she said. He looked at the light. "For standing next to me," she said. "Not in front." He looked at her briefly. Then back at the road as the light changed. He did not say "You're welcome." He did not say anything. But something in the way he drove changed slightly. A fraction less tension in his hands, a fraction more ease in his shoulders. In the way things change when something that has been holding has finally been received. They drove for a while longer. They did not go to his apartment or hers immediately. He stopped at a place near the river. Not a restaurant, just a quieter stretch of road with a small lot where people sometimes parked to look at the Han at night. He pulled in, turned off the engine. They sat in the dark with the river ahead of them, the lights of the city on the far bank reflecting in long broken lines across the water. "Tell me what you need right now," he said. She thought about it genuinely. Not as a performance, not to manage his feelings or protect him from what she was actually carrying. She sat with the question and gave it real attention. "I need tonight to be quiet," she said. "I don't want to talk about any of it tonight." "Okay. I want food that I didn't make. I can do that. And I want to sleep somewhere that isn't my apartment." A pause. "My place," he said. "Yes." He started the car. And that was how the night ended. Not with resolution, not with a conversation that fixed anything, but with food delivered to his penthouse and both of them eventually sitting on his floor with their backs against the couch because neither of them had felt like being at a table, and the city visible through his floor-to-ceiling windows. And at some point around 2 in the morning she fell asleep right there against his shoulder, and he stayed exactly where he was, not moving, just there, while Seoul continued outside without them. She had been positioned 2 years before Monife existed in Minit-jun's world. Not announced, not declared. Positioned, the way certain families handle certain things, with patience and indirection and the confidence that time and structure will do what direct pressure cannot. She had been brought to the right events, seated near him at the right dinners, mentioned in the right conversations between the right people. Her family name, her education, her social fluency all carefully illuminated without ever being pushed so hard it triggered his resistance. Because Minit-jun's resistance was the one force in the Kang universe that had never been reliably overcome. They had been patient. And then Monife Benjamin had walked into a gallery in an orange dress and everything that had been carefully arranged had come apart in the way arrangements do when they encounter something they did not account for. Yerin was not stupid. She was, in fact, extremely intelligent, which was one of the things that made her dangerous in a way that rage never could be. Rage makes mistakes. Calculation does not, or at least it makes different kinds. Slower, harder to trace, easier to deny. She had understood from the beginning what she was. The approved option. The correct answer to a question the family had been asking for years. She had prepared for a role, invested in it, built an identity around the possibility of it. And then someone else had stepped into the space she had been waiting to occupy, without permission, without preparation, without any of the credentials the family had spent years deciding were prerequisites. She had watched for 8 months. She had watched Minit-jun stand beside Monife in that boardroom. Had heard about the way he had looked at the board when they questioned his judgment. Had seen the photographs of them at events, walking together, his hand at her back, the specific body language of a man who has stopped performing containment and is simply present. She had watched all of it and understood something that the family had not yet accepted. He was not going to change his mind. This was not a phase. This was not distraction or rebellion or the particular temporary enthusiasm men like him sometimes brought to unsuitable relationships before the weight of their world pulled them back to the expected. This was real. She could see it in 100 small things that had nothing to do with grand gestures. The way he drove himself to her apartment, the way he showed up with food instead of flowers, the way he asked her questions like he was actually interested in the answers. She had watched all of that and felt the shape of it and understood. And then she had done something anyway. Not from rage. She wanted to be clear with herself about this, in the private space of her own thinking where she did not have to manage anyone else's perceptions. She had not acted from rage or jealousy or wounded pride. She had acted from something colder and more calculated. The belief that if she could not have the position, she could at least remove the person occupying it. The medical records had been her idea. She had a contact. It was not a formal arrangement, nothing that could be traced cleanly, more the kind of access that exists in certain worlds where information about certain people has always been considered available to those who know how to ask. She had asked. She had received the records. She had presented them to Minit-jun's mother as information the family deserved to have. His mother had taken them, because his mother was not cruel. Yerin wanted to be precise about this too, in her own thinking. The woman was not cruel. She was afraid. Afraid of losing her son to a version of the future she had not prepared for. Afraid of what Monife's presence meant for everything the family had built and intended to continue building. Afraid in the specific way people are afraid when they have controlled something for a very long time and can feel that control loosening. Fear and cruelty looked the same from a distance. Now Yerin sat in her car outside the Kang family home and thought about what had happened in that room. She thought about the way Minit-jun had picked up the papers from the floor, one by one, without hurrying. She thought about the way he had stood beside Monife. Not in front. Beside. She thought about the years of positioning. The dinners, the events, the careful management of proximity and opportunity. She had done everything correctly. She had been everything the family said they wanted. And it had meant nothing, in the end, against the simple fact of two people who had chosen each other without any of the architecture she had spent years constructing. She sat with that for a long time. Then she took out her phone and made a call. The person on the other end answered after one ring. "It's going to take longer than we thought," she said. The person said something she did not respond to immediately. "The family meeting happened," she said. He defended her in front of all of them. Fully, without compromise. Another response. "I know," she said. "But we're not done." She ended the call. Sat in the quiet. Then she started her car and drove away from the Kang family home and began thinking about what came next. The name arrived on a Wednesday. It appeared in a meeting request forwarded through 2 intermediaries, connected to a firm called Day One Capital. And it was a name that Minutjun had not seen in written form for 3 years because he had been careful to ensure that name did not appear in written form anywhere connected to him. Park Sung-ho. His head of security flagged it within 4 hours. Brought it to him in his office with the door closed and a tone that indicated this was not a routine briefing. Minutjun read the flag. Read it again. Put it on his desk. Then he spent 20 minutes at his window, which was what he did when he was thinking through something that could not be rushed. Looking at the city the way you look at a map when you are trying to find a route that does not yet have a name. Park Sung-ho was a name. Behind that name was a firm. Behind that firm, through a chain of connections that his security team had traced in 4 hours because they were very good at their job, was a man named Hwang Tae-Illinois. And Hwang Tae-Illinois was a chapter Minutjun had closed 3 years ago in ways that had required decisions he still stood behind even as he understood they were not decisions he would make the same way today. He was 34 years old. He had been building something since he was 26. In those 8 years there had been moments where the building had required, where the protection of what he was building had required, actions that did not involve lawyers or press releases or any of the formal structures that legitimate business is supposed to use. He had been careful. He had been targeted. He had been, in those moments, effective. Hwang Tae-Illinois had been one of those moments. The situation had been resolved, as completely as such things could be resolved, which was to say it had been resolved in a way that left no loose ends visible from the surface and several loose ends existing beneath the surface in conditions that had never been expected to resurface. They were surfacing now, because someone had gone looking for them. Someone had found Hwang Tae-Illinois and offered him resources, money, legal protection, the particular shelter that powerful people provide when they want something from someone who has something to offer, in exchange for information. Specifically, information about the period 3 years ago and the decisions that had been made during it. Minutjun cancelled the meeting request from Park Sung-ho with no explanation. Then he made 3 phone calls. Each brief. Each to a number stored under a name that was not the name of the person he was calling. Each ending with instructions that were clear and specific and that he would not have given without this level of certainty that they were necessary. He was not the same person he had been 3 years ago. He understood this about himself clearly. Monifer had been part of that change, not because she had asked him to change. She had never asked him to be anything other than what he was, but because being with someone who looked at him the way she did, with that particular attention that saw the person and not the position, had made him want to be more deliberate about who the person was. But deliberate did not mean naive. And the world that had produced Hwang Tae-Illinois had not changed just because he had. That evening Monifer arrived at his apartment with food, the way she sometimes did, unannounced, a bag from a place near her office, using her key because he had given her a key 3 months ago in a moment that he had tried to make casual and had not entirely succeeded at. She looked at him when she walked in. Just looked at him for a moment, the way she did when she was reading something that was not being said. "What happened?" she said. "Something I'm handling." "You say that a lot." "Because I handle a lot." She put the food on the counter. Started unpacking it. He came and stood beside her and took things out of bags the way they had developed the habit of doing, efficient, quiet, the particular domestic synchrony of two people who have spent enough time in each other's spaces to stop being deliberate about it. Is it the kind of thing you handle alone? She said. He thought about how to answer that honestly. For now, he said. Yes. She nodded slowly. Old business. Yes. That just became new business. Something like that. She handed him plates. He took them. They moved to the kitchen island. Are you safe? She said. He looked at her. Not the company, she said. You. Something in him went quiet. Not the good kind of quiet. More like the quiet of something being located that you didn't know was missing. Yes, he said. She held his eyes for a moment, checking the yes the way you check a structure you are about to put weight on. Then she nodded and looked at the food. She stayed until midnight. Then until 1. Then at some point she stopped looking like she was planning to leave and he stopped looking like he expected her to. And she fell asleep on his couch and he put a blanket over her and sat by the window and watched the city and thought about the 3 phone calls he had made and what they would set in motion and whether he had been precise enough about what he needed and what he was not willing to do. He sat there for a long time. She slept. Seoul did what Seoul always does. Nobody resolved anything that night. But nobody left either. The brand launch was in Qingdam-dong. It was the kind of event that existed at the exact intersection of fashion, money, and the specific Seoul social circuit that had opinions about everyone and forgot nothing. Monifer had been invited as a working consultant. The French house she had been advising for 4 months had asked her to attend in a professional capacity, which meant she was there to observe, to represent their interests, to be visibly connected to their presence in the Korean market. She had dressed for it the way she dressed for everything that required her to be impeccable, with the particular precision of a woman who had spent years understanding that in certain rooms, the first 30 seconds of her presence determined every subsequent interaction. Black. Structured. Her natural hair exactly as she wanted it, coily and full and precisely her own choice. She arrived 15 minutes early. The event coordinator met her at the entrance with a smile that had something behind it. Ms. Benjamin. A pause. Just long enough to be a pause. I'm afraid there's been a revision to the access list. She looked at him. Your credentials have been updated, he said. Smooth. Practiced. The voice of someone who had been told to say this and had been coached on how to say it without saying anything that could be quoted. She stood at the entrance of that venue and understood in approximately 3 seconds exactly what had happened and who was responsible. She did not make a scene. She stepped to the side, out of the foot traffic, into a quieter corner of the entrance corridor. She took out her phone. She called Celestine. Celestine Beaumont answered on the second ring, which for Celestine meant she had already been watching her phone because she had been expecting some kind of call. Not this specific call, but something. The woman had instincts that had kept her at the top of her field for 15 years. Monifer explained in 30 seconds. Celestine said 2 things in French that she did not ask for a translation of. Then she said, in English, crisp and certain, "Do not move." Monifer stood in the corner and waited. 7 minutes. The coordinator came back. His face had changed in the specific way faces change when someone has received a call that has reordered their priorities. The smile was still there, but it had a different structure now. Ms. Benjamin, I sincerely apologize for the confusion. Your access has been fully reinstated. She looked at him. I know it wasn't confusion, she said pleasantly. She walked in. She attended the event. She did the things she was there to do, observing, connecting, representing Celestine's interests with a precision that had made her worth hiring in the first place. She was professional. She was polished. She was exactly what she had come to be. And she felt every minute of it the way you feel something when you are performing functionality while a different process is running underneath. On the walk to the taxi after, she took out her phone and opened a note. Event access removal. Date. Location. Coordinator name. Circumstance. Celestine's intervention. Resolution. She added it to a file she had been building for 3 weeks. Not a formal document. A record. The kind of record you build when you understand that what is happening to you is not random, is not a series of unconnected incidents, is a pattern, and that patterns, documented carefully, become evidence. At home, she sat at her table with her laptop and a cup of tea going cold and went through everything in the file. The social invitations that had been subtly withdrawn. The professional platform that had declined to feature her for an interview they had previously confirmed. The client who had suddenly become unavailable after weeks of active communication, who had sent an email of such specific professional courtesy that she had read it 4 times looking for what it was really saying. Yerin's fingerprints were not visible on any individual piece. But the pattern had a shape, and the shape was recognizable. She built the file for 2 more hours. Then she went to bed. Minute-jun found out about the event through Jae-hyun. Jae-hyun had found out because Jae-hyun found out about most things that happened in Minute-jun's world before Minute-jun did, which was one of his primary functions and one of the reasons Minute-jun had kept him close for 12 years. He told Minute-jun over the phone, casually, in the middle of a conversation about something else, the specific tactic of someone who has learned to deliver difficult information inside innocuous containers. Minute-jun was at his desk. He listened, said nothing, ended the call. He sat for a moment. Then he thought about the fact that Monife had not told him. He sat with that specifically. Not with anger. That was not the right word for what he felt. Something more like the particular discomfort of learning that someone you care about is managing things they should not have to manage alone, but understanding simultaneously why they are managing them alone and not being able to entirely argue with the reasoning. She had not told him because she was handling it, because telling him would mean accepting that she needed him to intervene, which she did not, and she knew it, and she was right. But she was handling something that was happening to her because of him. He spent a day sitting with that before he said anything. When he brought it up, she was at his apartment, working. She had spread her things across his kitchen table with the comfortable confidence of someone who has stopped asking permission to take up space, which he found he liked in a way he had never expected to like anything that felt like an intrusion on his controlled environment. The brand launch event, he said. He put it down simply. No preamble. She looked up from her laptop. I heard, he said. She held his gaze for a moment. Then she sat back slightly. Not defensive. More like someone deciding how much of a conversation they actually want to have. I handled it, she said. I know you handled it. He pulled out the chair across from her. Saturday. I'm asking if you're okay. I'm building a file, she said. I want to understand the pattern before I respond to any single piece of it. If I respond too early, I tip her off that I've connected the dots. I want to wait until the file is complete. He looked at her. Yerin, he said. She nodded once. You know it's her. I've suspected for a while. What are you going to do about it? And here, this was the moment he had been thinking about, not quite knowing he had been thinking about it, since he had gotten off the phone with Jae-hyun. He had been thinking about what she would want, which was a new way for him to think about problems. His historical approach had been to identify the solution and implement it. The thought of asking someone else what the solution should be was not something his default wiring reached for naturally. He was reaching for it now. What do you want me to do? He said. She looked surprised. She covered it quickly. She was good at that, but he had been paying attention to her face for 8 months and he caught it. I don't want her to disappear, she said. That's not what I want. And I don't want you to fix it in a way that makes it look like I needed fixing. Then what? She thought about it. I want to finish the file first. I want it to be complete. And then I want her to understand, clearly, without any ambiguity, that she did not win. That I'm still here. And that I did that myself. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. Then I'll stay back, he said. For now. She breathed. Just slightly. For now. He stood, moved toward the kitchen, then stopped. Can I read the file? He said. Not to act on it. Just to understand what I'm not acting on. She looked at him for a moment. Then she turned the laptop around. He came back and sat beside her and read through it. All of it. Every incident, every date, every detail she had recorded with the specific thoroughness of a woman who understood that documentation was its own form of power. When he finished, he put the laptop back in front of her without a word. "You're thorough," he said. "I know. Celestine is solid. Completely." He stood again, went to the kitchen, started making coffee without asking if she wanted any because he already knew she did. "Tell me," he said, from the other side of the counter. "If anything escalates. Before it escalates, if possible." "Okay," she said. She turned back to her screen. He made coffee. And in the space between them, the kitchen island and the table, the shared domestic quiet of two people who have stopped performing for each other, something that had been slightly off-center for weeks moved back toward its correct position. Not fixed. Not resolved. Just adjusted. There was something Monifer had not said to anyone. Not to Celestine, who would have helped her carry it in the efficient, problem-solving way that Celestine approached everything. Not to her friend Adiz in Lagos, who would have prayed over the phone and then told her she was stronger than she thought, which was true but also sometimes the least helpful possible thing to hear. Not to Minute-jun, who was already carrying more than she had been shown and who she suspected was carrying even more than that. She had not talked about the Thursday morning. Not properly. Not in the way that would require her to put down the composure she had been maintaining like a load-bearing wall since it happened. She had told Minute-jun the facts of it. Briefly, the day it happened, sitting in her apartment in the middle of the afternoon with the medical confirmation on her phone and her voice doing the thing where it goes very flat when she is doing the most work to keep it level. He had come. He had stayed. He had not tried to fix it or contextualize it or locate the silver lining that was not there. He had just been present in the room with her while the worst of it moved through. And she had been grateful. Enormously. But there was a part of it she had kept back, not because she didn't trust him, but because she had not known how to put it down without also putting down the wall, and the wall was the thing holding everything else up. It was the particular loneliness of it. Not the loss itself. The loss was enormous, a specific kind of grief that sat in the body differently than other kinds of grief, and she had started to learn the shape of it. It was the loneliness of carrying it in a situation where the world around her was already so loud, where his family was already watching her for proof that she did not belong, where every professional interaction felt like a test she had not been told she was taking, where the noise from every direction was already so constant that adding her grief to it felt like it would simply become another thing to manage, another thing to be strong about, another thing to not let break her. She had been very strong. She was tired of being strong. On a Tuesday evening, 3 weeks after the family meeting, 2 weeks after the event access removal, 1 week after a client had quietly paused a project without full explanation, she sat in her apartment alone and let herself feel all of it without managing it. She sat on her couch. She did not cry immediately. She just sat there and let the full weight of everything that had been happening settle onto her without bracing against it. The pregnancy, the miscarriage, the family room, the papers on the floor, the look on Yarin's face that was almost sympathetic, the event coordinator and his practiced apology, the file on her laptop that kept growing, the exhaustion of being always composed in spaces that were looking for any reason to find her unworthy. She let herself feel all of it. And then she cried. Not dramatically. She was not a dramatic crier. It was one of the things she had always found slightly embarrassing about herself, the smallness of it, the way grief in her body was contained and quiet rather than the expressive, full-bodied thing she sometimes wished she was capable of. She cried the way she did everything, with her full attention and in her own way and without asking anyone's permission. Then she washed her face, made tea, opened her laptop, added to the file. And when Minute-jun called that evening, she answered on the second ring and told him she was fine, which was and wasn't true in equal measure. And she heard in the pause before he responded that he knew the ratio, and she appreciated that he did not push, and appreciated even more that he said, "I'll come by tomorrow," not as a question. "Okay," she said. She went to sleep early. Something was different in the morning. Not lighter, that was not the right word. More like something that had been sealed had been opened enough to let air through. Which was not comfort, exactly. But it was movement. The Huang situation moved faster than he had expected. By the 4th week, his security team had confirmed what he had suspected from the beginning. Huang Illinois had not re-emerged spontaneously. Someone had located him. Someone had offered him something. And the someone connected back to a board member. Choi Byung-soo. Minute-jun had known Choi for 11 years. Had inherited him from the previous board configuration. Had navigated around him the way you navigate around something that is not useful but is embedded too deeply to remove without causing structural damage. Choi was not stupid. He was careful, conservative, and deeply resistant to anything that threatened what he considered the appropriate order of things. Minute-jun's relationship with Monifer had been, for Choi, the most sustained threat to the appropriate order of things he had encountered in his tenure on the board. He had been quiet for 6 months. The quiet, it turned out, had been operational. Minute-jun sat in his office on a Thursday evening. After hours, the building mostly empty, the city visible in its entirety through his windows, and thought about Choi Byung-soo. He thought about the specific kind of decision that a man like Choi would make and the specific calculation behind it. Not emotional, not personal, purely structural. The belief that removing Monifer from Minute-jun's life was the equivalent of removing an instability from the company's foundation. Then he started building something. Not a threat. Not immediately. Something more careful. The kind of structure that uses information the way certain buildings use stress, not to break, but to support, or to redirect force in a direction that is more useful. He went through the documents his security team had assembled. Traced the connections. Identified the chain from Choi to Huang to Park Sung-ho to the meeting request. Documented each link with the specific care of someone who understands that documentation is only useful if it is airtight. He thought about Monifer's file. About her approach, patient, thorough, letting the pattern complete itself before responding to any individual piece. He had not been patient about things that threatened him, historically. Patience had never felt like a strength to him. It had felt like inaction, and inaction had felt like risk. But she had made him understand, not through any conversation about it, not through any direct instruction, simply through the way she worked, that patience was not the same as inaction. That waiting until you were certain was different from waiting because you were afraid. He worked until 2 a.m. Then he sent a single email to his legal team marked urgent. Then he went home. He did not sleep immediately. He lay in his apartment and thought about all of it. The board, Huang, Choi, the family meeting, Yerin's file. The Thursday morning 3 months ago when Monifer's voice on the phone had been so carefully controlled that the control itself had been the thing that told him how bad it was. He thought about the accumulation of all of it. Then he thought about a balcony and a river and a shared silence that had been the most honest conversation either of them had managed. He slept. She brought it up on a night that started the way their good nights always started. Her showing up with food, him pouring drinks, the particular ease of 2 people in a shared space who have stopped needing to perform for each other. They were at his kitchen table. Post-food. His apartment had that specific late evening quality where the city outside the windows was doing all its nighttime things and the interior was still and warm and separate from all of it. She said, "I want to talk about the baby." He put down his glass. "Properly," she said. "I haven't. With anyone. And I've been keeping it away from you because I didn't want you to carry any more than you already are. But I think I've been wrong about that." He looked at her. "I know you think I'm okay," she said. "Most of the time I am. But there are moments when I'm very much not okay. And I've been folding those moments up and putting them somewhere private because I didn't know how to have them in this." She paused. Looked for the word. "Context." "Everything that's happening," he said. "Yes." He was quiet. "I need you to know what it was actually like," she said. "Not the facts of it. I know you know the facts. What it was like." And she told him. She told him about the Wednesday before it happened, how she had been managing a client call and simultaneously managing the low-grade nausea that had become her constant companion and simultaneously managing the awareness that someone in his family was watching her in the specific way people watch things they are waiting to disqualify. She told him about the feeling of carrying something enormous and private in a situation where privacy felt like a luxury she had not been allocated. She told him about the Thursday morning specifically, the particulars of it, the physical reality of loss in a body, which is specific and inconvenient and does not wait for a good time to happen. The taxi she had taken to the clinic alone because she had not wanted to call him at 7 in the morning with something she could not yet make sentences out of. The clinical language on the paper they had handed her. The ride home. She told him she had sat in her apartment afterward for 3 hours before she called him because she had spent those 3 hours locating a version of herself that could speak without falling apart. And she had found her. And then she had made the call. You held it in until you could function, he said. Yes. While you were losing something. Yes. He was quiet for a long time. She watched him. I did the same thing, he said finally. She had not expected that. She waited. I knew what had happened, he said. I understood what it cost. And then I made myself stop sitting with it because sitting with it wasn't useful. So I started moving, handling things, protecting things, because that was the form that felt like something. Grief, she said quietly. He looked at her. That's what you were doing, she said. Grieving the way you know how to grieve, by fixing things. He held her gaze. Something behind his eyes was moving in a way she had not seen before. Not the controlled stillness he maintained in rooms full of people. Not the particular attention he gave her that was already its own form of tenderness. Something older than either of those things. Something that had been held very carefully for a very long time and was now being looked at directly. And I do it by building files, she said. We're both just doing the same thing differently. He did not respond immediately. He looked at his hands on the table, then at hers, beside them. She reached over, covered his hand with hers. He looked at their hands for a moment. Then he turned his over, laced his fingers through hers, held on. Neither of them said anything. The city continued outside. After a while she said, I don't want us to keep grieving separately. No, he said. Even when it's inconvenient. Even when the timing is terrible. I want it to be. Together, he said. Yes. He held her hand. Outside, Seoul. Inside, the two of them, together in a quiet that was not empty anymore. The piece appeared on a Friday morning. Not a major outlet. A platform that occupied the specific space between journalism and gossip in Seoul's social and professional world. Known enough to be taken seriously, unaccountable enough to publish things that could not survive editorial scrutiny. It had reach. In the circles that mattered to Monifa's professional life, it had significant reach. The piece did not use her name. It referred to a foreign consultant connected to a prominent technology and finance CEO and raised questions about professional conduct, specifically about client relationships, the ethics of consulting arrangements that might benefit from personal proximity to power, and what the piece delicately described as questions about the nature of certain representations she had made to clients regarding her independence and objectivity. Every detail was specific enough to be clearly about her. None of it was accurate. She read it twice before she called Celestine. The first time to understand it. The second time to locate exactly where the specific inaccurate details had originated, which meeting they had come from, which conversation, which particular piece of information was not publicly available and therefore had to have come from inside a specific room. She found it. A detail from a client meeting she had attended 6 weeks prior. Content of discussions that had been internal. Outcomes that had not been shared outside that room. 2 other people had been in that room. One of them she had worked with for 2 years and trusted completely. The other was a new addition to the client team who had been brought in 3 weeks before the meeting and whose hiring she had not been consulted on. She made a note. Called Celestine. Celestine read the piece in 4 minutes. Then she said, statement. Today. Not defensive, factual. We address each claim directly without naming the piece. Agreed, Monifa said. And the contact at the platform. I'll find out who placed the story. I have a person. Good. A pause. Monifa, are you okay? A question that deserved a real answer. I'm building, she said. I'm not okay yet, but I'm building toward it. Good enough, Celestine said. The statement went out at 4 that afternoon. From Celestine's company directly. Clean, professional, written by Celestine's communications director with Monifa's input. It addressed each claim in the piece factually, confirmed Monifa's work and professional standing with specific examples, and included, at Monifa's specific request, a line about external attempts to interfere in their professional relationship that anyone reading carefully would understand completely. 2 of her 3 paused clients came back within 24 hours. The third did not. She sat with that loss the way you sit with something that is not the worst thing that has happened to you but still matters, because it represented a relationship she had built over 18 months, and the loss of it felt like a refutation of 18 months of work, which was not rational but was human. She added it to the file. Minute-jun read the article at 3 in the morning because he did not sleep well on nights when things were in motion. He read it once fast. Then he read it again slowly, looking for the specific detail that had not come from a public source. He found it on the second reading. He sat with the detail and traced it backward through his knowledge of her recent professional activities and found the meeting and then found the name that did not belong. He sent a message to his security director at 3:45 in the morning that said only, background on Lim Sung-woo, added to client team at Yonseo Brands 3 weeks ago, need full history by Monday. He put his phone down. Lay in the quiet. Thought about the file she was building and the file he was building and the fact that they were building them in parallel without fully knowing it, which was either evidence that they thought similarly or evidence that they had both lived long enough to understand that some problems require documentation before they require action. Probably both. The meeting was on a Thursday. Minute-jun arrived with Jae-hyun and 2 lawyers. He placed a folder in front of each board member before he sat down. He set one in front of himself. Then he Saturday. Choi Byung-soo looked at the folder in front of him and did not open it. Open them, Minute-jun said. The room opened the folders. Inside each one was a complete and sourced documentation of everything. The connection from Choi to Hwangtae, Illinois. The meeting request through Park Sung-ho. The journalist who had published the piece and the contact who had placed it. The client team member who had attended the meeting. The event access removal and the chain of decisions behind it. Every connection, every link, traced and timestamped and cross-referenced and accompanied by a legal analysis that occupied the last 12 pages of the document. At the bottom of each folder, a legal notice. Clear in its terms. Specific in its implications. The room was the kind of quiet that happens when people are reading something and each sentence is removing a possible response. Choi started to speak. You have 2 choices, Minute-jun said. He did not raise his voice. He never needed to raise his voice in this room. The first choice is you resign today. Quietly. Standard severance. No public statement from either side. He paused. The second choice is that this documentation goes to the financial regulators, the relevant legal authorities, and 3 journalists I trust simultaneously. You have until the end of this meeting. Jae-hyun, to his right, looked almost serene. The other board members looked at the documentation in front of them and then at Choi and then back at the documentation. Choi looked at the table. Then he said, I'll need to consult my. You don't have time to consult anyone, Minute-jun said. That's the design. A long silence. Choi closed the folder. Standard severance, he said. Yes. No public statement. Correct. He nodded once. The nod of a man accepting something he cannot avoid. Not gracefully, but completely. The meeting ended shortly after. The lawyers stayed behind to handle the paperwork. Jae-hyun walked out with Minute-jun and said nothing until they were in the elevator. Then he said, Are you okay? Minute-jun thought about it. I will be, he said. She asked to meet through an intermediary. A message passed through someone they both knew peripherally, a mutual social contact who had clearly been asked to make the connection and had been given minimal information about why. The message was simple. Yerin would like to speak with Monife. Privately. No agenda except the conversation. Monife sat with the request for 2 days. Then she said yes. Because she was not afraid of this woman. She had never been afraid of her, cautious of her, aware of her, watchful of what she was capable of. But not afraid. And because she believed, in the part of herself that had learned over years of professional navigation to trust specific instincts, that this conversation was one that needed to happen face to face before any other resolution was possible. They met in a Taiwan, a cafe that was neither of their usual territory, neutral in the specific way places are neutral when they belong to neither party's story. Monife arrived first, ordered tea, sat at a table by the window. Yerin arrived 4 minutes later. She looked like herself, put together, precise, the particular polish of someone who had made an art form of appearing unaffected. But something was different in the way she moved. A fraction less certainty. Something in her eyes that was doing work. She ordered coffee. Saturday. For a moment neither of them spoke. Then Yerin said, "I'm not going to apologize." "I didn't ask you to," Monife said. "I did what I did because I believed I had a claim." She paused. "I was raised to believe I had a claim. 2 years of being positioned, of being brought to the right rooms, of being told, not directly, but clearly, that this was the direction things were moving. I had built expectations around it." "The family gave you hope," Monife said. Yerin looked at her. Something moved across her face. She had not expected to be understood. "Yes. And when I appeared, I was in the way of something you'd been promised." "Not promised. Implied." She looked at her coffee. "There's a difference, but it doesn't feel like one when you're inside it." Monife nodded. "The records," Yerin said. "The article." She stopped. Started again. "Those were, I told myself they were strategic. Information the family deserved. A story that needed to be corrected. But they were," she stopped again. "Cruel," Monife said. Yerin looked at her. "They used a loss," Monife said. "That's what they were. Whatever the justification. They used a loss." Yerin was quiet for a long time. "Yes," she said. Finally. Quietly. Silence. Monife looked out the window. At the street. People going places in every direction. "I don't know what you want me to do," Yerin said. "I don't know what I'm asking for by being here." "I think you wanted to be seen," Monife said. "As someone who made a wrong choice rather than a villain. There's a difference there too." Something shifted in Yerin's posture. "Just slightly. You're not what I expected," she said. "I know," Monife said. Not unkindly. They sat for a while longer. The cafe noise moved around them. Nobody else in the room had any idea what was happening at that table. "What do you do now?" Monife said. Yerin shook her head slightly. "I don't know. I've spent 2 years pointed in one direction." She paused. "I think I need to figure out what direction is actually mine." "That's a good place to start," Monife said. They finished their drinks. They did not leave as friends. That would have required more than one difficult conversation and more time than either of them had given it. But they left without the particular weight of open enmity between them, which was its own kind of progress. Quiet progress. The kind that does not announce itself. The meeting was Minute-jun's idea. He requested it formally, which meant something in the Kang family vocabulary that informal requests did not. He used the specific language that signaled this was not optional. He told Monife he was calling the meeting and he told her he wanted her to be there. She said, "It's going to be hard." "Yes." "Are you ready for what they might say?" "I'm ready for what I'm going to say," he said. She looked at him. "That's enough," she said. They arrived together. Minute-jun's mother was waiting when they came in. The grandmother was already in her chair. One aunt. The other had been excluded from this meeting at Minute-jun's request, which itself communicated something. He opened without preamble. "Monife is not a phase. She is not a problem I'm managing. She is not a test or a mistake or a complication. She is the person I've chosen, and that conversation is closed. His mother looked at her hands. The second thing, he said. The pregnancy was real. The loss was real. The use of that loss as evidence against her character, the records, the insinuations, was wrong. I want that acknowledged in this room today. Nobody spoke. His grandmother looked at Monife. Monife looked back. The grandmother was 91 years old. She had the eyes of someone who had seen every possible version of human behavior and had stopped being surprised by any of it. She looked at Monife for a long time, not challenging, not assessing. Looking at her the way you look at someone you are deciding to actually see. I was told the records came to us, she said. I did not ask how they came. No, Minutjun said. You didn't. She acknowledged this with a slight incline of her head. That was not right. Silence. I lost a grandchild, she said then, very quietly, without decoration. The room changed. Nobody had put it that way before. In those words, that plainly. The fact of what had been lost, not as a manipulation, not as evidence, but as a fact. A loss that had happened in this family and had been treated as a weapon rather than a grief. Monife's breath moved. Just slightly. The grandmother looked at her directly. I did not handle that with any grace. Not an apology. Something more truthful than an apology. A precise woman acknowledging with precision that she had been wrong, in the specific area where she had been wrong, without making it bigger or smaller than it was. Minutjun's mother looked at the floor for a long moment. Then at Monife. The things I said that morning, she said. The way I allowed things to proceed. She stopped. Started again. I was afraid. I am still afraid. I don't know how to. I don't understand everything this means. But I should not have, she stopped. Monife waited. I should not have allowed it, his mother said. Monife looked at her. At the grandmother. At the room. It was not forgiveness. She was not standing in that room distributing forgiveness because that was not how forgiveness worked, and she had too much respect for what the word meant to use it casually. Forgiveness would take time and movement and actual change that could only be demonstrated over time. But it was a beginning. She nodded once. Minutjun's hand, at his side, found hers briefly. Just for a moment. Then released. The meeting continued. Shorter than it might have been. More honest than any meeting in this room had been in the time she had been connected to this family. When they left, Minutjun walked beside her through the Kang family house and out the door and down to the car in the particular silence of two people who have just been through something that required everything they had. In the car he said, "Thank you for being in that room." She looked at him. "Thank you for calling the meeting." He looked at the road. She reached over and rested her hand on his arm. Not gripping it. Just there. He drove. 2 weeks later. His balcony. Seoul at night below them. The city doing its enormous indifferent thing across every direction. She had wine. He had water. They had eaten earlier. She had cooked, which meant his kitchen smelled like everything that made his apartment feel like somewhere people actually lived. She said, "I've been thinking about something." He waited. "I don't want to keep existing in a defensive posture," she said. "Even when things are difficult. I don't want that to be the default." "What do you want the default to be?" he said. She thought about it genuinely. "I want to build things. I want to be in a situation where my energy is going toward building rather than defending. I've spent the last few months in a constant fight and I'm good at fighting. I know that, but I'm better at building." He looked at the city. "The contract with Celestine's group is expanding," she said. "There are 2 new brands in discussions. My client base is coming back and coming back different. Better clients, more aligned with what I actually want to do." She paused. "I want to focus on that. Not on Yerin. Not on the family. On building." "Okay," he said. "That doesn't mean ignoring problems when they come. No. It means not organizing my life around them." "I understand," he said. "I want that too." She looked at him. "Do you? You're very comfortable in a defensive posture." He almost smiled. I'm aware of that. It's one of your more annoying qualities. One of them. You have several. I know. She looked back at the city. The Jaehyun meme thing, she said. He looked at her. I know you send him things to send me, she said. Because they are not serious enough for you to send directly and you want to send them anyway. A pause. That's, he started. Minute Jun. He stopped. I find it very endearing, she said. That's all. He looked at the city. She leaned over and rested her head on his shoulder. I love you, she said. He was quiet for a moment. I love you too, he said. I have for a while. I was managing the timing. You and your management, she said. Yes. Stop managing and just say it when you feel it. Okay, he said. She settled. He held her hand. Seoul below them. Everything it always was, enormous and complex and ongoing. A city of 10 million stories running simultaneously without any of them knowing about the others. Full of families and boardrooms and old grudges and new beginnings and grief that has not yet found its way out and love that has been earned slowly over the course of an enormous amount of difficulty. They were one of those stories. Still in it. Still choosing it. Still here. That was not a small thing. In a world that had offered them every reason to be somewhere else, every reason to be someone simpler, every reason to give up the specific difficulty of this particular choice, they were still here. And for people like them, who understood what everything costs, that was everything. That is where Season 2 rests. Not with a bow. Not with everything clean. With two people on a balcony who have been through something real and chosen to remain in it. Monifa stronger for knowing she can survive the worst of what this world offers and still come out building. Minutjun different in ways he is still learning. Still the most powerful presence in every room. Still the man every woman once ran from, but changed by the specific experience of someone who never ran, who saw him clearly and stayed. Their story is not finished. It never really is when two people keep choosing each other. But this is where we pause. Now I want to hear from you. Was Minutjun right to handle things quietly? Or should he have moved faster, more publicly, and let the consequences land louder? Was Monife right to build the file before responding? And that conversation between her and Yerin, did it go the way you expected? Tell me everything. Your location. The moment that hit you hardest. What you're still thinking about. The comments are where this story continues. If Season 2 moved you, share it. Pass it to someone who needs a story like this. Someone who is fighting to belong somewhere. Someone who is building something in a world that keeps telling them they shouldn't. This one is for them. And if you're not yet part of this community, welcome. This is what we do here. Every week. Every story. For you. Until the next time. From Seoul and the Sahara, where love costs everything. And still, somehow, it is worth it.